The Tears of God. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This book continues the story of the Arab sugar daddy and the beautiful Indian girl, and the story of the Indian child bride and the old Arab husband, and the story of the Indian Miss World and the rage of Muslims of the world, and also the story of Christina and the complete Jew. They have been written in English and translated into Arabic by the author Dr. Ahmed. This tale resonates with genuine love, strong resilience, and steadfast courage. I invite you to accompany me as I narrate the adventures of the extremely beautiful Indian girl, Aphrodite Khan, and her handsome American lover, Michael Lewinsky, in the Muslim world. Before we dive in the tapestry of the story, I would like to remind the reader this novel is narrated in 6 books. Book 1, The Arab Sugar Daddy and the Beautiful Indian Girl. Book 2, The Indian Child Bride and the Old Arab Husband. Book 3, The Indian Miss World and the Rage of Muslims of the World. Book 4, Christina and the Complete Jew. Book 5, The Tears of God, Jews, Blacks, and Muslim Women. And Book 6, The Hidden Life of the Prophet Muhammad. This is an intriguing epic story which exhibits resilience, love, and sacrifice. Book 5. Researching the social life of the Muslim woman in the Islamic world. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief passages from a review for printing in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. All characters in this novel are fictional, and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is merely coincidental. Chapter 30. The brutal attack of the rival wives on their best friend. Few months passed from the sad end of the innocent child bride Shaza, and another horrendous accident happened. The Indian wife Samira has recalled that her Sudanese friend also said she married when she was underage. She was 13 years old and lived with her late husband for 12 childless years. It was a happy married life until the Jihad war in the south of Sudan killed her husband as a martyr. After his so-called martyrdom death, Sulwa decided to live with her mother-in-law, Sakina, who had no one to care for her. At the time when Samir and Samira entered their lives, Sulwa was just 27 years old, noticeably still young, and extremely beautiful with a tall and sexy body. She is an overly sweet and friendly girl. In a brief time, Samira became her best friend. As the days passed by, the two girls became just like real sisters. They love each other, enjoying one another's friendship, and their souls knitted together. Samira tried to convince Sulwa to look for a life partner. Sulwa told her that she has decided never to marry again. She explained that the reason behind her decision is her mother-in-law. She knows that if she gets married, her new husband will take her away from Sakina, and she does not want that to happen. Sakina is an old woman, and she needs someone to take care of her in her old age. Samira appreciated the selfless decision, considering it altruistic and noble. The relationship between Sakina and Sulwa is no longer between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, but rather one of mother and her true biological daughter. In that, Samira saw parallels of the love between a Jewish mother-in-law Naomi and her daughter-in-law, the Moabitess girl, Ruth, who is mentioned in the Holy Bible. One day Samira found Sakina and Sulwa engaged in the middle of a serious discussion. It seems that Sakina is trying to convince Sulwa to do something that her daughter-in-law is not keen to listen to her advice. It aroused Samira's curiosity, and she instructed her Eritrean interpreter Mona to translate it for her. "I told you already I don't want to marry him. For how long he will keep bothering me with his marriage proposals? He likes you and he has promised that he won't take you away from me. What is the guarantee? Men can say anything before marriage, but when he gets the woman, he will start dictating his terms to her, and her family can do nothing to help her. The wife in Sudan is just an unpaid female maidservant and sex slave, and her husband is her master. But my daughter Salwa, you are so young, and you need a man. Our neighbors already began to speak against me. They said that I am a selfish woman, and I am keeping you with me as an unpaid maidservant. I am like your own daughter, and I love you as my mother. If not, for this reason, I would have gone back to my family's house as soon as my husband Khalid died as a martyr in the south of Sudan. Even my mother asked me many times to come back, but I refused to listen to her. I know all that, my daughter, but as a mother I want you to be happy. Who knows, maybe Allah will give you children with him. He already has many children. What difference it make if he gets children with me? After all, every man is after the beauty and body of the woman. As soon as she grows older, he will look for another younger woman and marry her. I have talked to you again about him because he had sent to me Haja Nazra and asked her to remind us of his marriage betrothal. Tell her to tell him that Salwa doesn't want to marry any man again. Samira warmed up and became happy with the idea that Salwa could remarry and still live with Sakina. The idea of many children, however, does not sit well with her. She suspected that her suitor may already have a wife or wives. Samira decided against asking more since the matter is already settled with Salwa's rejection. She dearly hopes in her heart that Salwa may one day meet the right man and marry him. Since Sakina and Salwa did not involve her in their private discussion, Samira did not ask about it. Little did she know that this issue was soon to become mainstream in the lives of women. A couple of days later, Samira once again is jarred awake by loud shouts emanating from the women's section. The shouts are tinged with aggression, signaling a vicious fight. It is Samir who heard the fight first, and then woke his wife up. Samira immediately summoned her female interpreter, and the two girls rushed to the women's section. Upon arrival, Samira saw two of the three rival wives of the polygamist Haj Osman physically attacking Salwa. Sakina is trying to stop the two women, but due to her advanced age, she cannot. Samira could not believe her eyes when she saw those two furious wives knocking Salwa down, jumping on her back, and hammering her mercilessly. Wife number 1 Khadija is sitting on her legs and beating her hips and buttocks while wife number 2 Hafsa climbs on her waist and hits her back, shoulders, and head. She is also slapping her cheeks and pulling out her hair. Meanwhile, the victimized woman Salwa is screaming at the top of her voice due to the terrible pain the two wives are causing her body. For 6 months, Samira saw that those three rival wives were the best friends of Sakina and Salwa. Their relationship even surpassed girlfriends, bordering on a sistership. How does such a wonderful friendship erode into bitter enmity and lead to such a bloody fight? Whatever the reason might be, it should not lead to that level of hatred and brutal attack. Overcoming her shock and disbelief, Samira ran to Salwa's rescue. It is clear to her that death will be the result without her intervention. She caught hold of one of the women and forcibly pulled her off Salwa's back and pushed her away. The other she pulled off by the hair until the woman screamed from the pain. Salwa, free at last, stood on her feet and assaulted one of the women and pushed her against a tree and began to beat her on her face and head. The other wife recharged and resumed fighting once again. All those movements happened in a fraction of a minute, so Samira could do nothing to prevent them. Nonetheless, she rushed towards them and joined the fight. The fight became the two rival wives on one side against the two girlfriends, Salwa and Samira. The Eritrean interpreter Mona and the refugee cook Zahara have decided to keep themselves out of it. The Eritrean girls have no intention of involving themselves in a dispute, the cause of which is unknown. They stood in a corner and continued to watch the four women. Meanwhile, the old woman Sakina is trying in vain to put an end to the deadly fight. She kept begging the two rival wives to stop the fight and discuss the matter verbally. The two wives are struggling to free their bodies from the strong hands of Salwa and Samira. Before Samira joined the fight, those two wives outnumbered Salwa and battered her. When they could not free themselves, they started to shower Salwa with the filthiest words she had ever heard in her life. She could not believe that those two wives could know and use such vulgar language. They called her a dirty whore, black bitch, slut witch, she-dog, bastard girl, female slave, galva, uncircumcised girl, and they said they are going to fuck her and fuck her mother who gave birth to a trash prostitute as dirty as her. The wife who is under Salwa's control somehow got a chance on her shoulder, and began to bite her until she caused her to scream for help. The loud screaming of Salwa brought a huge man inside the women's section. Samira has never seen that man before. He truly looks like Mr. Big and Tall, and those women like tiny goats or pygmies to him, as in the novel Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. With his long beard and dark skin color, he looks like a terrorist of the Nigerian group of Boko Haram. He is holding a long whip on his right hand and a big stick on his left hand. Without uttering a word, the huge man ran for Salwa's rescue and began to whip the wife who was biting her shoulder. 3 heavy strikes caused the wife to let go of Salwa's shoulder and flee for her life. The terrorist man still reached her with his whip and hit her twice on her buttocks. The wife managed to escape and ran toward her house. Before he reached the wife who was fighting with Samira, she also succeeded in freeing herself and took off like a fired earth-to-earth missile and headed towards her abode. The dinosaur still ran after her like he is chasing after a small lamb, and caught her before she disappeared into her house. He hit her several times with his whip until she fell to the ground. He continued to whip her everywhere, causing her to squirm like an earthworm, screaming at the top of her lungs. Samira does not know whether to run for her life or rescue the fallen wife, before the huge man whips her to death in front of everyone. By then many neighbors are peeping through small holes in their grass walls and watching the deadly fight. Sakina went to them and begged the man to stop beating his wife Hafsa. At this time, Samira guessed that this is the polygamist husband of the 3 rival wives. She heard a great deal about him, but had never seen him before. Oddly, the man listened to Sakina and stopped hammering his fallen wife, but he still kicked her with his shoe and spat on her face. He ordered her to get up and go inside his house. The wife sprang off the ground like a yo-yo and fled as if a tiger is chasing her. After that, the man walked out of the women's section and entered his house without uttering a word of apology or blame. By this time, Samira made a second correct guess that the cause of that deadly fight is women's gossiping. But she does not know exactly what her Sudanese girlfriend had said or done that led to those 2 wives to come and assault her inside her house. She hesitated to find so soon the cause of the fight, since the heat of conflict was still apparent on Salwa's face. Sakina also looked angry and tense. While Samira was thinking over what to do or say, she saw her Sudanese girlfriend suddenly run and stood near the fencing of the grass wall of the rival wives' house and shouted, "Oh Hajj Osman, I am ready to marry you. Go to my father and take him to the mosque and conduct our marriage contract right away. I am ready to be your wife number 4". Samira is shocked to hear those words. Those words explained to her the reason behind the deadly women's fight, that she tossed herself in its heat without knowing its cause. She knew that Salwa has spoken those words without meaning them because she said them in anger. She also perceived that the polygamist butcher was not possibly going to take them seriously for the same reason. He has witnessed the fight between Salwa and his 2 wives Khadija and Hafsa, and most probably knew the cause behind it. After that quarrel, none of the 2 women is in the mood to talk about it. Salwa is extremely angry, and hence she refused to eat any food or drink any water. Samira knew the sensitivity of the matter, and hence avoided talking about it to any of the 2 women. She returned to her American husband Samir and told him about it. But she suddenly was able to connect the dots. She remembered the serious discussion between the 2 women about the mysterious marriage proposal of the man who kept harassing Salwa about it. Therefore Samira understood that the man who is after her lovely Sudanese girlfriend and sent his marriage request several times to her is none other than the notorious polygamist, Haj Osman Baraka. What a shame, said Samira to herself rather than to her husband Samir. How could that shameless old man even think about it? How could he think of marrying the best friend of his 3 wives? Samira thanked God when she recollected that Salwa had already rejected his marriage proposal several times, and she is not likely to change her mind. How can she even think of marrying a man as old as her father? The notorious butcher is having already 3 wives under his roof and 20 children. So, what reason in his married life led him to go for a 4th wife who is a widow and the best girlfriend of his wives? No rational woman will ever think of marrying such a polygamous husband even if he is the last man on earth. Chapter 31. A rebellious Muslim bride at the Sharia court. The fierce and deadly fight between Salwa and her 2 female neighbors has brought a sad end to a wonderful friendship. Those 2 families used to live together as one family. The neighboring women Sakina, Salwa, Khadija, Hafsa, and Nadia were almost living in one big house. Before the brutal attack, those girlfriends ate together, played together, solved their problems together, and helped each other in every viable way. But then, after that horrendous incident, the door that connected the 2 houses has been shut down permanently. Fencing of grass as high as the Berlin Wall, and long like the Great Wall of China, has been built between the 2 houses. Even the 20 children are forbidden from crossing over to the home of Sakina and Salwa. The 2 widowed women felt the effect immediately. As if overnight more than 23 people have died in their house. Samira noticed how the breaking up of that wonderful friendship had clouded the faces of Sakina and Salwa with sorrow and filled their hearts with depression. They have no more girlfriends and children to visit or to host. Sakina has lost her authority as a female judge and advisor to the 3 rival wives. Salwa also has lost the warmth of her 3 girlfriends who were to her as her own real sisters. Before the bloody fight, she used to spend hours and hours socializing with those 3 rival wives and their many children. Salwa is having a school in her house. She used to teach a daily 2 hours as a kindergarten female teacher to the children, and their wealthy father used to pay her for her classes. Besides, the girlfriends used to play some games together such as snakes and ladders, chess, and ludo. Though many Muslim women are imprisoned inside their houses like dangerous creatures, and banned from venturing in the streets, some of them turned their homes into secret ladies' clubs. Those women enjoy the company of their female neighbors. Some of them learn to play various games and playing cards and even use divination to predict their future events. They use something like the prayer beads to foretell the future. Their great means of entertainment are gossiping and sharing meals. Samira came to know through Salwa that the deadly fight was caused by gossip that a woman by the name of Haja Nusra had passed it from house to house. She is a female talebearer like a devil who went around planting her evil seeds in the ears of the other women. She is a jack of all trades, a matchmaker of marriages, circumciser of small girls, midwife for pregnant women, a saleswoman of ladies' clothes, a female sorcerer, and Hanana, the woman who applies henna on the hands and legs of other women. She is also a secret female pimp, and a hooker who allows men to practice sodomy with her. She does not agree to vaginal sex for fear of becoming pregnant, and gets slain in an honor killing. Moreover, she is a divorcee, a widow, and a lesbian who has a secret girlfriend. She was the one who brought the last marriage betrothal of Haj Osman, in which he asked for the hand of Salwa, in a halal Islamic marriage for the 7th time. Haja Nusra also is a secret female double agent with 2 faces. Knowing that Salwa had rejected the marriage proposal 7 times, she announced to the 2 rival wives Khadija and Hafsa that their best girlfriend, an immediate female neighbor, has agreed to marry their polygamous husband. Wife number 3 happened to be not in the house, and was called away because of a death in her family. She lost her aged father. Sulwa was a bit lucky to be attacked by two older rival wives. The third wife, Nadia, who became demon-possessed twice, and got raped by Hajj Harun to legalize her pussy, is the youngest, and a great deal stronger. If she gets mad, no one can control her, even her dangerous husband. Samira has divined and understood that the congenial friendships between Sulwa and her three girlfriends have terminated. The fight also has dire consequences for the warring parties. Sulwa is the first to be affected by it. Her mother came visiting one day and brought the incredible breaking news that her daughter is no longer a widow but a married woman. She said to Sakina that Sulwa had been given in marriage to Hajj Osman. The marriage contract was conducted in the biggest mosque and signed by Sulwa's father, the groom Hajj Osman, the imam, and two male witnesses. On hearing the disturbing news, Sulwa told her mother that she had never accepted his marriage proposal. She has made it noticeably clear to her mother, and everyone present at that time, that she had rejected the betrothal of that shameless and lustful man 100 times over, and she is not going to allow him to touch even her finger. Seeking to placate her, the mother told her daughter that Hajj Osman Baraka came to their house and swore under oath by placing his right hand on the Holy Quran that you have said by your tongue in public earshot, you have accepted his betrothal. He also said that you told him to go to your father and take him to the mosque and conduct your marriage with him. The mother added that he expressly said you would like to be his wife number 4. Sulwa countered that she had spoken those words in anger, and she meant only to tease his two wives who came, assaulted her, and beat her inside her own house. The mother responded by saying that the Hajj had heard her words, took them seriously, and acted upon them. Therefore, she is the one to be blamed, not him. For that reason, the mother believes that her daughter should accept the dire consequences of her foolish words. Moreover, the mother told her daughter that her words had reached the mosque, and her marriage was conducted according to the holy book of Allah, and the blessed sunnah of his infallible prophet Muhammad. No matter how much the mother has tried to convince her daughter to accept the consequences of what she said, Sulwa still stood firmly on her decision that she would never accept such a sham marriage. The American couple Samir and Samira thought that the firm decision of Sulwa nullified the validity of the marriage contract. For them, such a marriage contract must not be considered to have any form of legal validity because the bride's signature is not included in it. Nonetheless, the couple found out that the matter did not end up with the visit of the mother. It erupted again on the following day when the so-called groom approached Sakina and demanded his lawful wife number 4. Sulwa confronted him like an angry lioness and told him to his face that she was not his wife, and she was not prepared to marry a man who was as old as her father and had 3 wives in his ropes and 20 sons and daughters in his house. Hajj Osman did not argue with Sulwa or beg her to come to his house. He simply took the matter to the Sharia court. He lodged an official complaint against his new bride. In his lawsuit, he mentioned that his lawful wife Sulwa bint Hajj Ahmed refused to accept him as her husband. He attached a certified copy of their marriage contract to support his grievance. He also included 10 declarations of facts bearing the statements and signatures of 4 men and 6 women as witnesses. Those are the 10 witnesses that Hajj Osman claimed they had heard Sulwa shouting from her house and requesting him to go and take her father and marry her at the mosque. In this matter, the notorious polygamist is not lying. Those 10 people are neighbors who were secretly peeping through the fencing of the grass walls of their houses and watching the deadly fight between Sulwa and his 2 wives. Shortly after submitting his lawsuit, Sulwa received an official letter from the Sharia court of Nahid City ordering her to go to her husband's house as soon as possible. She has been given 7 days to comply from the day the letter is issued. A copy of the same letter has been mailed to Hajj Osman's address. Nevertheless, Sulwa refused to follow the court's order and tore the official letter of the Sharia court. When Hajj Osman understood that Sulwa was not likely to come willingly to his house, he took the matter once again to the Sharia court. This time, he requested the judge of the Sharia court of Allah and his Prophet Muhammad to issue the obedience sentence against his rebellious wife number 4, Sulwa bint Hajj Ahmed. In Islam, the wife must keep her maiden name after her marriage. Even so, the judge of the Sharia court did not issue immediately the obedience verdict, but invited Sulwa through an official letter that she must come on such and such date and appear before him. In his letter, he also stated that he wanted her to come and tell in court the reason that prevented her from going to her husband's house. Sulwa's case is treated differently by the Sharia court because she is not a virgin. The Sharia court came to know through Hajj Osman's complaint that she is a widow who was already married and deflowered by her late husband. According to Sharia law, a divorcee or a widow cannot be married without her consent. Her consent must be taken verbally before her marriage contract is signed between her father and her groom. However, she is not allowed to sign her marriage contract. Her wali, father or guardian, is to sign the contract. The Sharia law dictated that the virgin girl, no matter how old she is, her father has the right to give her in marriage without asking her permission. In other words, her consent is not required like in the case of a divorcee or a widow. The American couple Samir and Samira are following the legal proceedings unfold with great astonishment. They believe that such a development should not possibly happen in fairy tales, much less in real life. Nonetheless, on the appointed day, Sulwa bint Hajj Ahmed went and appeared before the magistrate of the Sharia court, Maulana Sheikh Omar al-Badari. Sakina, Samira, Samir, Mona, and Zahara accompanied her to the court. Neither her father nor her mother is prepared to come to the court and support her. Her parents and all her relatives considered her daring refusal to join her lawful husband Hajj Osman as a disgrace to her and her family. There is a saying in Sudan that if the wife goes to the judge and the watch to the repairer, both become useless. First of all, the magistrate of the Sharia court informed Sulwa that her marriage contract with Hajj Osman Baraka is lawful and valid. It was concluded in the mosque between her legal wali, her father Hajj Ahmed Wad Albla, and the said husband Osman Baraka, conducted by the Imam Sheikh Mosa Muhammadain Ibrahim, and witnessed by two mentally sound Muslim men, Hussein Wad Taha and Mosa Wad Abshir. Moreover, he told her that the marriage contract bore the bona fide signatures of her father, groom, the imam, and the two adult Muslim male witnesses. He also showed her the 10 statements of facts bearing the statements and signatures of the witnesses who heard her verbal acceptance of the marriage proposal. Then the judge asked Sulwa to give him one lawful reason for preventing her from joining her husband. Before Sulwa could answer him, the judge reminded her that her reason must be lawful according to the Sharia of Allah and His Messenger. Sulwa told him that she had rejected the marriage proposal of Hajj Osman several times, and made it clear she is not interested in marrying him or any other man. The judge rejected that reason and told her that she had shouted from her house to Hajj Osman, and said blah blah blah, and many neighbors heard her verbal consent. Sulwa admitted that she made that statement, but she said she did not mean it. She explained that because she got assaulted and physically beaten up by two of his wives, she made that statement to tease and provoke them to anger. Her excuse has been rejected by the court. Then the judge changed the topic and asked her a very silly question. He asked her whether she slept with Hajj Osman, and she found out that he was a sexually impotent man. Sulwa has become so embarrassed by that question and remained silent. He also asked her another unnecessary question, as to whether her husband Hajj Osman had deserted her for quite a long time. The judge has a list of reasons that he memorized by heart when he was studying his Sharia law at the Islamic madrasa or school. If any of them is answered in the affirmative by the wife, then she can have a legal ground to leave her husband and apply for divorce. But the judge of a court should not be so stupid as to ask questions which he knew have nothing to do with the case in question. There are only 3 lawful reasons under which the Muslim wife can seek a divorce from her husband through the judge of the Sharia court. The judge has already asked 2 of them, and the third one if she lived with her husband and discovered that he was so poor that he could not buy food to feed her or buy clothes to cover her nakedness. The Muslim husband does not need any reason to divorce his wife, or need to go to the Sharia court to grant him a divorce. He is required by the Sharia to say to his wife, "I divorce you," or "You are divorced," and voila. She is divorced. The judge asked his final question, and answered it himself. He asked Sulwa whether she lived with her husband and found out he was not in a good financial position to provide for her physical needs, and buy clothes to cover her nakedness. Then he told her that he knew that Haj Osman was a wealthy butcher, and had 3 wives and 20 children, and none of his wives came to court, and lodged a complaint of negligence against him. Finally, the magistrate whispered a few words in the ears of the 2 old men sitting on each side, and then claimed that the judge, and his jury, and Allah, and his prophet had reached a fair verdict. One of his 2 assistants is too old, and therefore the judge must shout loud in his ear. The other one fell asleep, and only when the judge came close to him, he arose from his stupor. Then the magistrate of the Sharia court, Maulana Sheikh Omar al-Badari, declared the wife under investigation faulty of rebellion, and hence the court of God had found her guilty according to the Sharia court of Allah and his messenger Muhammad. Accordingly, the Hukm al-Taa, the obedient sentence, is issued against the disobedient wife, Sulwa bint Haj Ahmed. She must be transferred as soon as possible by the police authority to the house of her husband and placed for an indefinite period in the house of obedience, until she got tamed and became obedient to her man. Chapter 32. Hukm al-Taa, or the Sharia court obedience verdict against the disobedient Muslim wife. Under Sharia law, there is an Islamic law called the obedience verdict, which can be translated as the law of obedience against the rebellious Muslim wife. This law is usually issued by the Sharia court against any married Muslim woman who refuses to join her husband or leave his house without any lawful reason, and goes to her parents' house or somewhere else without his permission, or against his wish. Physical abuses such as beating or rape are not considered sufficient grounds for the wife to desert her husband. When the Sharia court issued that obedience sentence, it would send a police wagon full of cops to the place where the disobedient wife was staying or hiding. The cops have the right to beat, drag, force, and whatever other means of coercion they find necessary to transfer that rebellious wife to her husband's house. If her close relatives such as her father, brothers, uncles, or cousins stand in their way, then the policemen are also empowered by the law to apply force against those relatives who try to obstruct justice. They can beat them or arrest them, and if need required, they could kill them too. Now, when that first round is performed successfully, whether through the shedding of blood or not, then the cop's duty is over, and the rest is left to the husband. What the policemen have done is called in the Sharia applying the obedience law. In other words, they have carried out the order of the Sharia court by taking the disobedient wife from where she is found to the obedience house, or the house of her husband. This house is worse than a maximum security prison. It can be any locked-up room inside the husband's house. Even a storage room or toilet can be used for this purpose. The disobedient wife will be imprisoned inside that small room or hut indefinitely. During her confinement, she will be denied all her rights as a human being, including her basic needs. She will be starved deliberately, beaten up continuously, and raped daily by the man she does not want to live with, her so-called husband. This harsh treatment will continue until her devils leave her head, and her spirit of resistance and disobedience crumbles. Many Muslim imams preach in their mosques that after Eve disobeyed God and ate the apple fruit from the forbidden tree in paradise, she became permanently possessed and controlled by him, they mean Satan. Therefore, every woman is inherently possessed by devils, and her head is always haunted by jinn and ghosts. Imprisoning the disobedient wife in the obedience house is part of Sharia's teachings. The matter is not just left for the husband to do it or not. It is compulsory and considered part of the process of curing the rebellious wife and delivering her from her stubborn nature, inherited at birth. Having explained that inhumane law, let us now see what has happened to the so-called rebellious lawful wife of Hajj Osman, after the judge of the Sharia court issued Hukm al-Taa against her. Samir and Samira presumed it was merely a formality, and did not take the Maulana Sheikh Omar al-Badari seriously until they saw policemen entering Sakina's house, with orders to detain Salwa. The cops came on a Friday morning because it was a public holiday, and they knew that Hajj Osman would be at home when they delivered his errant bride to him. Men are expressly forbidden from the women's section, but that day the policemen defied that divine Islamic restriction and stepped inside the taboo ground of the women, and have a full unobstructed view of the totem animals without their coverings. Their early morning raid is not expected, and hence Salwa and Sakina are taken by surprise. They are still in their sleeping gowns. The two women are not given a chance to cover their bodies with their abayas and saris, and their heads and faces by hijabs. On that Black Friday morning, the Indian wife Samira witnessed the incredible happening right before her naked eyes. If she has not seen it for herself firsthand, there is no way anyone can convince her that it has happened to her best Sudanese friend. Once again, even if her husband Samir had seen it and told it to her, she might not have believed him, in what those cops had done to Salwa on that Friday morning. While she is watching it in horror, she rejects her mind and denies it to her naked eyes. Her American husband Samir for the first time dared to stand on a chair and observe across the fencing the goings-on in the women's section. He does not care less if the cops shoot him or place him under arrest. If it is not for the respect for the agreement that he signed with Sakina, that he must never step foot inside the women's section, he may have crossed the line of demarcation in the sand and stepped in. Salwa resisted, cried, and begged the cops not to drag her from her house and separate her from her loving mother-in-law. The cops paid no attention to her tears, crying, and pleadings. Sakina also wept bitterly and asked the policeman not to drag her beloved daughter-in-law out of her house. They continued to drag her physically, as if she were a notorious female criminal, or a dangerous wild animal. When Salwa understood that the cops were not going to stop taking her by force, she began to fight back, biting one of them on the hand, drawing blood out of it until her mouth became red. The policeman screamed for help, resulting in his law enforcement associates hammering Salwa's body with strikes by their batons and kicking with their heavy boots. Samira could not control herself as she saw her girlfriend being hammered mercilessly. Firstly, she shouted to her American husband and asked him to dial 911 and report the hideous crime to the police. Samir told her he had no cell phone, and even if he had one, how could he call the police officers to come and fight against or arrest their colleagues? Secondly, still, she is locked in her Western mentality and norms. Samira ignored her husband and shouted at the Sudanese policemen, insisting that they have no right to abuse a defenseless woman in that cruel way. One of the cops threatened her that if she tried to come in between, they would also place her under arrest and drag her out to their wagon along with the rebellious bride. Samir intervened quickly and told his Indian wife in English not to interfere. The American husband does not understand exactly what the cop has said to Samira, but it sounds as if he has threatened the life of his wife. The neighbors usually will peep through the gaps in the grass walls of their houses and secretly watch any women's quarrel, wife beating by her outraged husband, or a daughter being hammered by her father or brother. However, that morning, the inhabitants of two neighboring houses climbed on chairs while watching what was going on in Sakina's house. Those neighbors are watching with great amusement, as if they are spectators watching a bunch of rodeo cowboys who are wrestling down a dangerous bull. Some of them put their little children on their shoulders and made them watch the arrest of the disobedient wife of Hajj Osman. While the policemen are struggling to subdue Salwa and take her to their wagon, her long dress is rolled up to her waist until her red underwear is exposed. The sight of her exposed thighs, hips, and buttocks led the women to laugh and the men to whistle. None of them bothered to tell the cops that the young woman's nakedness had been exposed. Once the policemen concluded that the rebellious wife was going to be difficult to handle, they decided to tie her up. They twisted her hands behind her back and handcuffed her, cuffing her feet as well. Meanwhile, Sulwa continued to kick and roll around on the ground like a goat, resisting those who wanted to slaughter her. The cops joined hands together and with much difficulty carried her bodily out of the house. Then they threw her resisting body into their wagon. Their police wagon has iron nets just like the truck the zoo workers use to bring in wild beasts such as tigers, lions, wolves, and hyenas. Samira and Sakina followed them to the perimeter of the compound, where they found Sulwa continuously weeping and begging for her release. The Indian wife also is crying and pleading for mercy for her dear Sudanese girlfriend. Undeterred, the cops climbed in their wagon and drove away. After Sulwa had been arrested and taken away, Sakina and Samira continued to cry unceasingly for her until they lost their voices and their tears dried up. Sakina blamed herself for not being able to prevent the inhumane arrest of her beloved daughter-in-law, and Samira is pacing the compound like a restless woman who lost a very dear person, worried sick that the cops might take her beloved girlfriend somewhere and rape her before performing their official court duties of delivering her to her so-called lawful husband. A week later, after Sulwa had been transferred by the officers of law enforcement to her so-called lawful husband, Sakina and Samira could not contact her or get any information about her. They anticipated that she would be locked in any one of the huts in the house of the notorious polygamist Haj Osman. Is she still in chains or set free? If she is freed from her fetters, how is she to live among the other rival wives who hate her and have tried to kill her inside her house? They attempted to murder her when they merely heard unconfirmed gossip that she was planning to marry their husband. And now that she is married to their polygamist husband, what are they going to do to her? For sure, if they have not already murdered her, they will turn her life into a living hell. Those worries and more occupied the hearts of Sakina and Samira and gave them sleepless nights and restless days. The absence of Sulwa created a huge gap in the heart of each one of them, and there is nothing in the entire world that can fill it. Chapter 33. The Islamic Law of Inheritance. The American lovers, Samir and Samira, have decided to leave Sudan and return to their country as soon as Sulwa had been kidnapped by the cops and forcibly taken to the house of her abuser and rapist, the notorious polygamist and dangerous butcher, the despicable Haj Osman. What they have seen in the flesh is more than what they had expected to see in the Muslim world. After they witnessed how Sulwa had been deprived of her freedom, abused, beaten, tied up like a notorious female criminal, dragged like an animal, and taken by force to somebody's house against her wish, they have no more interest in spying on the abuse of women in the Muslim world. Needless to say, she had been probably brutally raped by the evil polygamist, and she will remain his female slave captive in his house until death sets her apart from his ropes. The American couple simply cannot take it anymore. They do not want to see or learn of any more abuse of women, their limits breached. Leaving the abusive, evil, and barbaric Muslim society also left them with doubts that anyone is ever going to believe their report. Who is going to believe that which is supposedly permitted by the so-called religion of peace and upheld by Sharia law? Samir and Samira concluded that Islam is the most misogynistic and hateful ideology to exist in the history of mankind. Everything coming out of that religion is heinous, abominable, dreadful, and sheer wickedness. Islam is a personification of evil. The person who created such hateful religion has the mind of a man who is despicable, disgusting, repugnant, sick, pedophile, terrorist, and possessed by Lucifer the devil. Nevertheless, the American couple cannot make good on their decision to leave because they are worried about the good woman, Sakina. She became akin to a mother to them and especially to Samira. How is she going to live by herself? If they could, they would have adopted her as their own mother and taken her to the United States of America. She is of advanced age. No longer young, the years of unending hardship have bent her back and dimmed her eyes. She complains of hearing problems, blurred vision, and having trouble walking. Sulwa was her only joy. And after her loving Ruth was taken away from her, Naomi is now all alone in every sense of the word. Samira repeatedly pleads with Samir to bless her wish to adopt Sakina as her own mother and take her to America, even though Islam forbids adoption. Samir informed her that the American immigration law will not allow her to sponsor Sakina unless she is her adopted mother or related to her by blood or matrimonial union such as her mother-in-law. Samira decided to help Sakina financially, and now and then she can send her some money from the States. The American couple shared their decision with the loving old woman. Sakina expressed her sadness about missing two loving daughters at the same time, Sulwa and Samira. She still encouraged her loving Indian daughter to return to her country. She told her that the woman in Sudan is vulnerable to all kinds of man's exploitations. She also shared her plan with Samira. She said her immediate plan to sell her house and move into her younger brother's house. The news of a brother or any other relative was new to Samira, but she greeted the knowledge with joy. Samira announced that she is not going to leave until Sakina's house is properly sold off, and she has moved safely into her brother's home. The loving old woman is so pleased by the gesture, unheard of mercy in a hard land like Sudan. Notwithstanding, selling a property in a Muslim country is not easy unless it is registered under your name. Unfortunately, Sakina's house is registered in the name of her late husband who had passed away many years ago. According to Sharia law, if Sakina has a surviving child, that child stands to inherit the house. In the case of multiple children, the house will be sold, and the proceeds must be divided among the siblings. The division is not equal across the genders. Let us assume that the old widow Sakina has a son and a daughter. The son gets twice as much as the daughter is eligible for, as is written in the Quran, in Surah Al-Nisa 4, verses 11 to 12, and verse 176. If the house is sold for $30,000, the son must get $20,000 and the daughter $10,000. If Sakina has two daughters and one son, then the son gets $15,000 and the daughters get $7,500 each. There are verses in the Quran that detail inheritance and how much the beneficiaries inherit. Writing a will is illegal and unenforceable in Islamic Sharia law. The father has no right to decide who to inherit his estate and the quantum. The following verses show how the inheritance of a deceased Muslim man is to be distributed between his surviving relatives. The Quran states, Allah enjoins you about the share of inheritance of your children. A male's share shall equal that of two females. In case there are only daughters, more than two shall have 2/3 of what has been left behind. And if there be only one daughter, her share shall be a 1/2, and if the deceased has children, the parents shall inherit a 1/6 each, and if he has no children and the parents are his heirs, then his mother shall receive a 1/3, and if he has brothers and sisters, then the mother's share is the same 1/6. These shares shall be distributed after carrying out any will made by the deceased or payment of any debt owed by him, the deceased. You do know not who among your children and your parents are nearest to you in benefit. This is the law of Allah. Indeed, Allah is wise, all-knowing. Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 11. You shall get half of what your wives leave if they die childless. But if they do have children, your share shall then be a 1/4 of what they leave after carrying out any will made by the deceased or payment of any debt owed by her. And they, your wives, shall have a 1/4 of what you leave if you die childless. But in case you have children, they shall then get 1/8 of what you leave, after carrying out any will made by you or payment of any debt owed by you, the deceased. And if a man or a woman is made an heir on account of his or her relationship with the deceased, and he or she has one brother or sister, the brother and sister shall each receive a 1/6, and if they are more than two, they shall then share in 1/3, after carrying out any will that had been made by the deceased or payment of any debt owed by him, without harming anyone. This is a command from Allah, and Allah is all-knowing, most forbearing. Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 12. They ask you. Say, Allah enjoins you about your heirs that if a man dies childless and he has only a sister, she shall inherit half of what he leaves, and if she dies childless, then her brother shall be her heir, and if there are two sisters, they shall inherit 2/3 of what he or she leaves. If there are many brothers and sisters, the share of each male should be that of 2 females. Allah makes His commands clear to you so that you do not err. Allah knows all things. Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 176. Since Sakina has no living child, then her late husband's brother and sister are entitled to claim his inheritance. Accordingly, as soon as the news spread that Sakina was planning to sell the house she was living in and move to her brother's house, her brother-in-law and his sister submitted a lawsuit at the Sharia court and demanded their shares on the property of their late brother. The old widow refused their demands. The Islamic court placed a hold on the sale of the house and invited the disputed parties in for a hearing. After attending the hearing, the court ruled that the government must sell the disputed property and the money to be divided between Sakina, her brother-in-law, and sister-in-law. The brother-in-law must get half of the sale proceeds, and the second half to be divided equally between Sakina and her sister-in-law. Sakina did not like the ruling of the Sharia court. She objected because she knew that her brother-in-law is one of the wealthiest men in the city, and he had never come to visit her after her husband died, or sent a single piastre to her. Likewise, her sister-in-law is married to a wealthy man with many houses and properties. Sakina submitted an appeal to the Sharia court, and stated the reason for her objection to its unfair ruling. Not surprisingly, the Islamic court rejected her appeal, and ruled again that the house to be sold in the public auction, and the money must be divided among the relatives according to the Sharia of Allah and His Messenger Muhammad. The American couple Samir and Samir encouraged Sakina to contest the unfair distributions. They advised her to appoint a lawyer and sue the Sharia court in a civil court. They even promised to cover the expenses of all the legal proceedings until the poor old widow gets a fair decision. As a consequence of this specified legal matter, the American couple postponed their return home indefinitely, deciding to stay in Sudan until justice was served.